He's just going to say, no, I'm going to make you look like a living corpse. You're going to sit still till I do it. I think that's where he came from. I don't think that he particularly was a nasty man. Boris Karloff was a true gentleman, and if he would not have taken that abuse if this was anything nasty. And he was
a big star.
He loved him, yeah.
You know, from research I've seen on it, first of all, Lon Chaney Jr. could always have said no. I don't want to play a mummy with all this muck on me or a wolf. He could have said no.
He picks some difficult parts, let's put it that way.
He plays every single monster.
Yep, he's the only one to play all of the classics.
Son of Dracula, the Frankenstein monster, the Wolfman, the Mummy. So he does all these films all in a very short period. From 1931 to 45, he does film after film after film. In his defense, wearing a makeup and sitting in a chair that long is very hard. I don't think it's necessarily a criticism of a guy like Lon Chaney who didn't like it so much as a compliment to someone like Boris Karloff, who never complained.
Yeah,
and really
personality type.
He loved Jack Pierce all the way through. You could see it in the late 50s. So they're really, you know, it depends on the person. For instance, today, right? Think of the actors who have worn lots and lots of makeup on films. Eddie Murphy, for one, right? He's been in lots of movies with makeup. Well, from what I understand, he was kind of cranky on the last one he did called Orbit, and didn't like sitting for hours and hours. And he had done that. Professor in Coming to America.
Yeah, I talked to Rick Baker about that many times over the years, and Eddie was actually, you know, was more tolerant. Jim Carrey on The Grinch freaked out.
There's another one.
Because it was just so claustrophobic, he just couldn't handle it. So one day, and I was filming Ron Howard around the same time, we were putting together the original video for the Universal Studio Tour, and Ron, being the gracious guy that he is, came in like on a weekend while he was making, you know, the Grinch movie, and he went through Baker's entire makeup application just to kind of go, hey, we're all in this together, guys. But makeup's not easy stuff. But Lon Chaney Jr. obviously had a heart, as this image over on the screen shows. If you guys don't know too much about this, this is Moose. This is Lon Chaney Jr.'s dog. And really quick, it's kind of a sad story. He shows up, if you go through the archive and you look at pictures, you keep seeing the dog on the set. He's on the set for almost every film until he was hit by a truck on the Universal lot. So one of our own people ran over poor Lon Chaney's dog, Moose. But he obviously loved this dog because you just see him, all these pictures, he's always on the set. And I think, I've even heard, Scott, I don't know if this is true or not, but I've heard that the dog had a cameo on The Wolfman. Have you heard that story?
I have heard that. I had never heard that it was true. It was just a rumor.
It's one of those ones you don't know.
You know, there in that picture, what's interesting about that is he doesn't look all that uncomfortable there. I mean, he's kind of relaxed. So, you know,
I don't know about the dog, but you know,
the only actor other than Karloff who I've ever heard about in history not complain ever about makeup is Gary Oldman. He sits there for hours as Mason Verger in was it Hannibal or was the other one? Hannibal, right? He's Mason Verger, where he's completely buried, and all the Bram Stoker's Dracula characters, and on and on and on. There's a gentleman there who was completely buried in prosthetics. I mean, the only thing that you saw of him when he played old Jack Pierce was his eyes. Everything, ears, neck, the whole thing. Why don't you make a comment? What's it like doing a full multi-hour makeup and then sitting in it all day?
Maybe I'm in a small club, I don't know, because when I'm sitting in that chair, and it's been 4.5 hours just about each time, I feel like a spectator watching the artist work, and I am myself just in awe, you know, because there's usually a mirror there where I can see. And then when they pull out the airbrushes and the fine, you know, the fine brushes, all that, I mean, I'm just fascinated at the artistry. And you know, you can mentally go into a zone and just sort of detach and relax and not fall asleep, but just, you know, realize it's like getting your head cast, and that can drive some people crazy, because that's some claustrophobia and some heavy weight, you know. But you just go into a zone, and I don't know, I've always enjoyed it. You know, taking it off is actually worse, because that lasts a few days. You take it off and go, that's it, but it's not it. It's all every week, you know, every day you shave and you're picking it.
And taking it off in this era would have been particularly painful.
Awful.
And just to illustrate the relationship, there's also this great still. There's a great story that's been around Universal for years and years. A gentleman who wrote the screenplay for The Wolfman told this story. That one day he was in the commissary and Chaney Jr. came up to him and said, "I'm going to kick your ass." And he was like, "Whoa, what?" And he's like, you know, you came up with this character, and now I'm being tortured every day, and I have to wear all this makeup, and you know, blah, 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 and he very famously said, "Don't blame me, blame Jack Pierce." After the Wolfman, again, we're into sequel. The Ghost of Frankenstein. What's probably most notable about this particular film is this very unusual makeup that Jack Pierce did for Lon Chaney Jr. Again, he just seems to always have the most difficult, painful makeups. Apparently had a terrible allergic reaction with this one for Ghost of Frankenstein. Imagine being covered in, is that Fuller's Earth probably at that time? I mean, horrible stuff to be covered in. There's Chaney Jr. again. Now he's assumed the role of the mummy in the Mummy's Tomb. Frankenstein meets the Wolfman. Now Chaney Jr. is playing the Wolfman. Bela Lugosi gets his turn playing Frankenstein.
And that, if I might comment, Mike can
Sure.
underscore this, but by this point, I believe Lugosi there is wearing a slip rubber headpiece. That's not
To speed up the makeup process.
Yeah.
And originally, Chaney was slated to play both monsters. The pre-publicity touts it.
Yeah.
You can't even imagine production time, what that would have taken.
Yeah, the thing about that particular movie is, you know, they say Bela Lugosi played the monster, but several people played the monster in that movie. I mean, the opening shot, you see the Frankenstein monster, it's a full frame, but close-up of the monster's face. It's not even him, it's Eddie Packer, the stuntman.
Bill Perkins.
We don't know, do we? There's a dispute of which stuntman it was. But, you know, he was hardly in there. Isn't there a shot of Chaney in there as well at some point? You know, everybody played
They
Frankenstein.
threw them all in.
And supposedly by some of the films I'm sure we're getting to, the Mummy films, Chaney Jr. isn't in a lot of those shots.
Is it double?
The wider shots are double, which indications are it is Eddie Parker, but it doubles a lot of the stars of the time.
I think it would have been particularly disappointing at this point in Jack Pierce's career. You know, he finally gets the chance to do family opera. And Lon Chaney was, you know, an absolute idol for Jack Pierce. But something happens. His original makeup that he wanted to use for this film is not used. And instead, this is a little bit hard to see in the still, but it gets reduced to just basically a scarred kind of burn mark on the face. Do we know much about what happened with this one? I know particularly Claude Rains was opposed to it.
I think Arthur Lubin said it was too scary.
Yeah.
Like his original idea was too hideous, which is weird because
For what famous for.
Yeah, and for its time, the 1925 Phantom that Lon Chaney did was considered, you know, shockingly horrifying. So Pierce had to cut it down at the request of Lubin.
And you can see at this point, the studio is starting to lose energy on the idea of monster movies. Family opera, it's all about the technicolor, the production values, the music. Times are changing. Son of Dracula followed in 1943. Lon Chaney playing the Dracula character. The Matt Ghoul, again, harkening back to that look that was very similar to Imhotep in the original Mummy movie. The Mummy's Ghost in 44. And now let's just pile all the monsters in one movie and call it a day. And House of Frankenstein in 1944. Here's Glenn Strange now assuming the role of the Frankenstein monster. The Mummy's Curse, and this is a curious picture. Looks like a mask of the mummy. At that point, were they giving up on doing that full makeup application?
I mean, it was a mix of both. It's Chaney's intolerance to the makeup and also Jack Pierce not wanting to work with Chaney, plus the fact that Chaney got drunk and Stuntman had to take over, so they just made a slip-on mask to do that, which was silly on everyone's part, including you, Universal. No offense, guys, but you're going to get you know your top billing is Lon Chaney Jr. as the living mummy, but he's just walking around doing nothing. He's just dragging his foot like yourself. But you know that's all he's doing.
I have a good reason.
Why not make him the lead hero or something? Something that poor Lon Chaney Jr. would have rebelled in and loved to have done that, you know, because he wanted to be romantic. He wanted to be a leading man, and he was stuck with his monsters. So. Again, I don't think it was all Chaney's fault. I'm a Chaney fan. So it wasn't all Chaney's fault.
In the interest of fairness, that rubber mask was not made by Pierce. The man who made it is Ellis Berman. You guys know that name? B-U-R-M-A-N. And Ellis Berman Sr. Made all of Pierce's rubber. And then his son, Tom Berman, is an active makeup artist. And then his grandsons, Barney and Rob, are both active makeup artists. And from what I understand, is Rob back there? Somewhere. But the Bermans, you know, are legendary in their use of these materials, and that was a definite rubber headpiece.
And obviously, for publicity's sake, because he'd done so many of these films, they take the picture with Pierce.
The last known Jack Pierce piece of any kind of historical significance is one of those faces, and Bob Burns has it. Does he have it here this weekend? I don't even know if he doesn't have it. But Bob Burns owns this piece of Lon Chaney's face from The Mummy's Curse.
And now times are really changing. You know, House of Frankenstein worked. Let's try House of Dracula again, throwing all the monsters in one movie. John Carradine playing the character. Again, Pierce and Glenn Strange. And, you know, this is one of the last pictures. This is the last picture of this presentation, but it kind of, to me, it's, you know, it's what happened to Jack Pierce. He became a victim of his own creation. Sadly, Pierce was pretty much just kind of kicked to the side of the road at the end of his career, and maybe, Scott, you could elaborate on what happened and why Pierce was essentially fired, as they had to make it for Universal.
Several people were all the same year. Not only Pierce, but the head of costume design, Vera West, who you mentioned, and John P. Fulton, special effects. All got the heave-ho. But you know what? They had merged with International Pictures, so it was Universal International. The war was over, right? So they said, you know what? We're going to be doing a whole different thing here. Let's move on. Let's clean house. And a lot of these guys were let go. Pretty tragic. I mean, Fulton had a big career, though. He worked on Ten Commandments. You know, he went on to do a lot of great things. But Jack Pierce, the rest of his career is kind of slumming it, really. I mean, he's on B-movies, he's doing westerns.
He ends up on Mr. Ed, the TV series, at the end of his career.
That's how he ends. He's gluing monofilament to Mr. Ed's lip. He's doing makeup on Alan Young. So it's kind of tragic that his career didn't go well. Vera West passed away almost immediately after she was let go. But Fulton went on to a great career.
And also, the Laemmle family that started all this for Universal back in the earliest days of the Universal classic monster movies. You know, in 1936 into 37 is when they lost the studio. Jeff mentioned they were making Showboat and the Dead